That topic is the fragmentation of the political right. That fragmentation is being caused purposefully by a splinter faction of people led by a young man named Nick Fuentes. They call themselves the Groypers. They are white supremacists. They hate women, Jews, Hindus, many types of Christians, brown people of a wide variety of backgrounds, blacks, America's foreign policy, and America's Constitution. They admire Hitler and Stalin. And that splinter faction is now being facilitated and normalized within the mainstream Republican Party. The main agent in that normalization is Tucker Carlson, who is an intellectual coward, a dishonest interlocutor, and a terrible friend.
Today, Tucker Carlson is the most dangerous anti-Semite in America.
He's a representative from Florida. He's the same guy who bragged about not washing his hands after he had a handshake with Netanyahu. He's repeatedly introduced bills to criminalize anti-Semitism, infringing upon free speech. I mean, he obviously, I'm sorry to say, but he obviously cares more about Israel than he does, principles like free speech. So, buddy, my advice to you, Randy Fine, is just move to Israel at this point.
I have just about had it with Matt Walsh. Matt, you work for this guy. Whose side are you on already? Matt Walsh, every day on his show, he goes on Twitter in his show and says, this is all just gossip and drama. It ain't gossip and drama. This is the war. And Walsh wants to get on Twitter and say, I just don't want to talk about it. I just want to keep taking a paycheck from the worst of the worst Shapiro. You got to pick a side, and nobody can let him get away with this.
So if you've been following my social media for any long period of time, you know I used to be pretty big on Twitter. I used to tweet a lot. And since 2025, I've pretty much quit Twitter. I have gone back to tweet about very few stories, mainly to get on board with the fight against the chorus crew, those Democratic influencers. But it's pretty rare I actually tweet, and it's pretty rare I actually go on it. I usually go on Twitter to just dig up tweets and reaction to certain events. So Zoran Mamdani winning the mayor election of New York, I went on Twitter to see the reaction to that. But while I was on getting tweets for a video and stuff like that, I stumbled across something which has been brewing for the longest time, and I've probably even made videos about this before, but I've never seen it this bad. It's basically conservatives in America are now having a full-blown civil war, basically over how much they support Israel. So you have the pro-Israel faction, and you have, I hesitate to call them the anti-Israel faction, because a lot of them don't hate Israel because they have such a problem with what they've done to Palestine. It's more that they're these America firsters who just don't want to aid foreign countries. But you do have a significant majority of them actually hating Israel, but it's more because Israel is Jewish rather than its human rights abuses and just it being an apartheid state. And this is manifesting itself in Nick Fuentes versus Ben Shapiro, which has been an ongoing feud for the longest time. But now what's happening is Ben Shapiro is directly calling out these people because Nick Fuentes went on Tucker Carlson. He got a New York Times weird profile thing, and he's becoming increasingly mainstream. And it also combines with people like Candace Owens, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tucker Carlson, and even people like Brett Cooper, who are more going into the anti-Israel stuff now. What you're basically seeing is older, millennial and even older Republicans trying to cling on to the conservative identity as being inherently pro-Israel versus a lot of Gen Z conservatives and some millennial conservatives as well being against Israel. But what is so funny about all of this is a lot of these conservatives like Ben Shapiro are acting like the stuff Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson are saying about race and gender and all that stuff is just terrible, is so out of step of what conservatives generally say. And I would just say, and I think a lot of you would agree, the conservative movement in America and people like Ben Shapiro have been open fascists for a decade, right? And what is happening is they're finally having a problem with some people who share that sentiment because some of the younger people don't like Israel. That's pretty much purely what it's about. And they're losing their grip on the conservative movement being pro-Israel. That is literally it, because these people fundamentally do not have a problem with a lot of the stuff things like Nick Fuentes believe. The only other thing they have a problem with is because Nick Fuentes is more homophobic and is anti-Semitic, because a lot of people at the Daily Wire are gay or Jewish, they're feeling now personally threatened as well by this rising movement amongst Republicans. But Nick Fuentes is the Frankenstein's monster. all the people opposing him now are the people who laid the groundwork for people like Donald Trump. Even though they didn't like Donald Trump, they created this cesspool online of just insane racism and fascism.
Conquest and colonization and settling of this land was overall a good and noble and courageous thing. It is good that it happened, and we should be grateful for it. The people who came here and claimed this land were heroes. It was heroic. And they were heroes not because of the other good stuff, but because they came and claimed it.
The difference here is Mussolini was a pretty bad guy. He wasn't the worst guy in the world. He wasn't Stalin. He wasn't Lenin. But Mussolini was, let's say, at least a mixed bag, leaning on the side of bad. He was a bad political leader. Franco was, broadly speaking, pretty good.
And now they hate it because these people who were indoctrinated by people just like them, Ben Shapiro, Steven Crowder, Tucker Carlson, all these people, are now turning around being like, yeah, we actually agree with you on most stuff, but we actually also hate Israel as well. And that's too much for people like Ben Shapiro. But it seems like he's just becoming increasingly irrelevant. And obviously this is scary in some ways, because you don't want to see something like even worse than what you had before becoming more popular. But what always happens with far-right movements is loads and loads of infighting, which can kneecap their ability to actually like taking power. And I'm hoping we're seeing that in the UK as well, because you have Tommy Robinson, obviously backed by Elon Musk, who is a more extreme voice. And then you have a lot of the reform politicians and candidates who are also pretty extreme, but they want political power, and they're kind of like trying to act like politicians, where people like Tommy Robinson and others are just absolutely insane and unhinged and would never be accepted in like the classist system of the UK. But you hope that infighting will actually destroy reform's ability to actually get into power. So you hope that something similar is happening here with the conservative movement in America. But all of that coming up for you today. If you like my video after you've watched it, please like it. Maybe subscribe to the channel as well. If you want to support my work, please check out my Patreon page and check out YouTube memberships. And if you want to follow me on social media, don't follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Blue Sky and Instagram at the Kavernacle. So basically, for a bit of context around this, Tucker Carlson was the really, really racist white nationalist Fox News host who got eventually fired. He started his own show focusing on Twitter, and he's interviewed people across the political spectrum, but mainly lately people who are anti-Israel. And he interviews like really fringe voices and insane people like, you know, Alex Jones. He's had Marjorie Taylor Greene on recently as well. And now what has sparked all of this is he had Nick Fuentes on, and they just talked about basically all his politics. And what Tucker Carlson is doing with his guests is these interviews aren't adversarial. They're not him challenging these people. It's basically he's getting people on who agree with him on certain things, and they frame the conversation all around the things they agree on. You saw him have Anna Kasparian on, and I covered this, where they basically act like they agreed on like most things. It was like a really bizarre thing to see someone who non-stop called Tucker Carlson a racist until like 2022 going on this show and acting like he wasn't, and he's not actually anti-Semitic or racist. But anyway, it's basically mainly a interview show platforming like the worst far-right voices in America. But because Tucker Carlson is pretty tied up with conservative establishment figures, and he knows a lot of like these media figures, they got really mad because Nick Fuentes has of course been attacking Donald Trump. JD Vance said like just insane things about JD Vance and said stuff about Ben Shapiro loads as well. Anyway, for a lot of mainstream conservative figures, this interview was a step too far, and now they have gone after Tucker Carlson pretty hard. So I want to just show you a clip. Ben Shapiro made a 40-minute video responding to this interview and talking about like why it's so bad. And you might have seen this term being thrown around. They call the anti-Israel conservative movement the woke right. Now, here is a little clip of Ben Shapiro talking about why he has so many issues with this video.
I want to do something different on today's show. We're going to cover one topic in depth. That topic is, I think, the most important thing happening in the country. It was a hot topic last week, but I wanted to take some time to really gather my thoughts and speak on it in coherent fashion, holistic fashion. That topic is the fragmentation of the political right. That fragmentation is being caused purposefully by a splinter faction of people led by a young man named Nick Fuentes. They call themselves the Groypers. They are white supremacists. They hate women, Jews, Hindus, many types of Christians, brown people of a wide variety of backgrounds, blacks, America's foreign policy, and America's Constitution. They admire Hitler and Stalin. And that splinter faction is now being facilitated and normalized within the mainstream Republican Party. The main agent in that normalization is Tucker Carlson, who is an intellectual coward, a dishonest interlocutor, and a terrible friend. And Tucker Carlson last week was aided, abetted, celebrated for normalizing Nazism within the Republican Party by the mainstay organization of the traditional right, the Heritage Foundation. The issue here isn't that Tucker Carlson had Nick Fuentes on his show last week. He has every right to do that, of course. The issue here is that Tucker Carlson decided to normalize and fluff Nick Fuentes, and that the Heritage Foundation then decided to robustly defend that performance. Those who criticize both Tucker and Heritage aren't canceling. They are quite properly drawing a moral line. So, for those who don't understand what's going on, let's begin with Nick Fuentes. Now, as I mentioned, last week, Tucker Carlson had on Nick Fuentes. Fuentes is a 27-year-old man who's dubbed himself the leader of a movement called the Groypers. He has a large audience of alienated young white men in particular, and he's earned increased media attention over the course of the past few years, especially over the last year. Now, from Tucker Carlson's interview, you might have gathered that Fuentes has some borderline views on race, a peculiar obsession with what he calls organized Jewry, and a rather sad relationship with the female sex. But probably you came away thinking that, for the most part, Fuentes lives on the radical edge of normality. You think that if you watch the interview, because Tucker Carlson decided that it was important not only to host Fuentes, but to smooth over his views, water them down, and make them far more palatable to a normal audience. As we'll discuss in a bit, this is what Tucker Carlson does for a living.
So if you're really curious, you can watch the whole thing. It is like a really, really thorough takedown of Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson, and you don't really see this much on conservative YouTube. A few times you've seen these people do it, but even the way, for example, like when they tried to take down Steven Crowder and everything, the way they frame it is designed in a way to try and keep as many people in their audience as possible who might actually like the other person. So what they're doing here is a lot different. They're literally just saying Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes are just terrible and outlining why they're so bad. But again, it's really, really funny to me that Ben Shapiro is even bringing up all the racism and hatred of women that these people believe in. Like, him and all the hosts at the Daily Wire don't believe the exact same shit and haven't said the exact same shit for years and years and years, and that there is virtually no difference between Ben Shapiro, Tucker Carlson, and Nick Fuentes, apart from where they stand on things like foreign policy and mainly on Israel support. Like, that is literally the only difference. So that is why it's so funny that they think there's a difference. But yeah, you can tell people like Ben Shapiro and others, they mainly care about keeping the conservative movement pro-Israel. And of course, Nick Fuentes responded to this, and just like, this is the shit I was seeing on Twitter when I logged on. No to Ben Shapiro, no to the neocons, no to dual citizens, no to Netanyahu, no to cancel culture, no to genocide and ethnic cleansing, no to the Christ-hating Talmud, no to Greater Israel, and no to our Jewish oligarchy. America first, America forever. So a split between Ben Shapiro and Nick Fuentes is obviously something we've seen for a long time, although Ben Shapiro has been really hesitant to actually call out Nick Fuentes. But the split between him and Tucker Carlson is really interesting and has actually forced a lot of conservatives to now pick sides, like what side you actually want to be on. One of the more interesting ones, which shows the way it's going, is Brett Cooper was defending Nick Fuentes from being called a Nazi by Ted Cruz. And I think that just shows everything. And even watching this clip, I was surprised at what she was saying, because you could really interpret it as being like anti-Israel. And one of those things she was talking about was a guy called Randy Fine. You might have seen him for having the most racist Twitter account. And that's saying something, like the most racist Twitter account on Twitter. And she was coming after him. And he was another one who was just like attacking Tucker Carlson, even comparing him to like Hitler. So let's have a look at a few of these clips.
You are so blinded by your ridiculous, insane hatred of Tucker Carlson that you cannot see how irresponsible and hypocritical you are being. I mean, these tweets from Ted Cruz, I'm going to read you next, are a great example of this. So just a month ago, he tweeted this. He said, "They don't kill you because you're a Nazi. They call you a Nazi so they can kill you. Political violence is a left-wing phenomenon. Enough is enough. We need to shut it down." And then in response to Fuentes and Tucker this week, he tweeted this. "Trump's bombing of the Ayatollah's nuclear facilities made the little Nazi mad. Good." So now you're turning around and you're calling somebody that you don't like a Nazi. You're doing this out of blind rage because you're so angry that the conservative base's attitudes are rapidly changing, that Nick Fuentes is getting national attention, and so you have turned around and in response, you are compromising your own values in anger, which is such a dangerous precedent to set. And unfortunately for you guys, yes, the attitudes are changing, so again, it makes sense why this group is incredibly frantic. You know who he is. He's a representative from Florida. He's the same guy who bragged about not washing his hands after he had a handshake with Netanyahu. He's repeatedly introduced bills to criminalize anti-Semitism, infringing upon free speech. I mean, he obviously, I'm sorry to say, but he obviously cares more about Israel than he does, principles like free speech. So, buddy, like, my advice to you, Randy Fine, is just move to Israel at this point. Like, considering you had to go through anger management classes a few years ago, I genuinely think you would probably be happier if you just moved to Israel. And that's not a dig at him. That's just a fact. It's a nudge of encouragement. I want everybody to be happy. I want everybody to be healthy. I think you would be happier if you just moved to Israel. You could be over there singing songs with Mike Huckabee.
So why I think this is interesting is I don't think Brett Cooper actually believes in anything. She was a failed actress who became a Daily Wire host. So she just believed what the Daily Wire told her to believe. She would just have the same positions as Ben Shapiro. Now she's left. She says she's like besties with Candace Owens. Candace Owens is obviously going against things like Israel. And now she is also being more comfortable in being against Israel because so many Gen Z conservative men that watch her channel also don't like Israel, and that even leads her to defend actual Nazis like Nick Fuentes from being called Nazis, just because she knows where her audience are now. But I think that's interesting because although I think she probably knows Nick Fuentes is a Nazi, obviously someone who's an insane misogynist as well, she's an actress who is just acting, right? So she's playing to what she thinks people want right now, and that shows you how much, online at least, American conservatives are divided. And even that person, Randy Fine, she brought up, who again is just this insane racist, he also went really hard after Tucker Carlson as well, even more so than Ben Shapiro. So listen to what he said.
I want to talk about the dark force rising on our side. Multiple speakers have talked about the rise of anti-Semitism on the right. But it is not enough to speak in platitudes or generalities about the fight. We must call evil by its name. 5 years ago, if I was talking to my father, who's watching, hi Dad, if I was talking to my father at 8:59 p.m. at night, he would say, Randy, I gotta go. Tucker Carlson's gonna be on. But make no mistake, today, Tucker Carlson is the most dangerous anti-Semite in America. He has chosen to take on the mantle of leader of a modern-day Hitler Youth, to broadcast and feature those who celebrate the Nazis, those who call for the extermination of Israel, to defend Hamas, to even criticize President Trump for stopping Iran's nuclear ambitions. Friends, make no mistake, Tucker is not MAGA.
So yeah, another insanely pro-Israel conservative is saying Tucker Carlson is leading like Hitler Youth and shit. It shows you the deep split happening in the conservative movement right now, and showing you how it's not about like policy disagreements. It's literally about this one issue. We've seen other people like Matt Walsh, who is like even more openly fascist than people like Ben Shapiro. He's trying to play both sides, and the America First movement aren't buying it because he obviously works at Ben Shapiro. People like Megyn Kelly are saying that all this infighting allowed people like Mamdani to win. And even people involved in the Heritage Foundation were defending Tucker Carlson. So I say, for the short term, let these people fight and let's see who wins. But I think this is also an interesting story that just shows how much Israel and how much their supporters around the world, especially in the West, how much they have overplayed everything. Because if you are getting Christian American conservatives to massively turn against Israel in this way, where they feel really comfortable either being anti-Semitic or just being anti-Israel generally, right? You know you've overplayed your hand, because that was one of your biggest support bases in the West. Even people who were raised like evangelical Protestant and stuff, they're turning against you. And even when we see things in the UK like the gaslighting around those Tel Aviv football thugs and how everyone was saying that them being banned from coming to watch a game in the UK was anti-Semitism, they've done this so much over and over again, it's just lost all meaning, which is obviously a terrible thing. because it actually puts Jewish people more in danger, because now no one is going to take anti-Semitism seriously, because they've been conflating anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism so much, and they've been weaponizing anti-Semitism for like a decade in the UK to attack the left, where now no one cares about it, and loads of people are thinking actual neo-Nazis are actually cool because they're anti-Israel. And their control on these movements is weakening massively. And I just don't think there's any going back to a pre-2023 support for Israel amongst either far-right conservatives or just general society. Everyone now hates Israel. And these people like Ben Shapiro or liberal Zionists in the Democratic Party or liberal Zionists in the Labour Party or the Conservative Party, they're losing this battle. And it's going to become, as the generations go on, politically untenable. And you're seeing that in America, where as Gen Z become in control of the American conservative movement, being pro-Israel is probably going to be like the minority position. And even Nick Fuentes was saying this, that J.D. Vance will not be able to become president unless he bows down to the Groypers. And J.D. Vance was defending them recently, even those group chats where they were talking about loving Hitler and stuff. And now they're saying, if you are pro-Israel and you don't agree with our agenda, we're going to take you down and you're not going to become president. So this is probably like the worst I've ever seen of a conservative civil war in America. And you see it in many parts of the world, and it's literally all around one issue. Now, to people on the left, obviously, Israel is often a litmus test because it's an apartheid state doing some of the worst crimes against humanity. If you support that based on some liberal identity politics, of course we think you're a piece of shit. But for conservatives, it's basically like, are you so racist that you're also an anti-Semite, and that means you hate Israel because you're an anti-Semite, right? They don't give a shit about the brutalization of Muslims. They don't give a shit about Palestinians. They don't give a shit about any of this stuff. It's just about pure racism. And as I said, it's a Frankenstein's monster. Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, all these people, they created Nick Fuentes. They created these racist Groypers, and now they've taken it a step further. If you're going to indoctrinate people in fascism, you can't be surprised when they actually take it a step further, look back at history and be like, yeah, we actually like the fascism from there, where they were like really, really anti-Semitic as well. And this is going to increasingly become like the conservative base in America. So I don't know what these people actually do, like Ben Shapiro. They're becoming increasingly irrelevant only for older conservatives. And let's just hope this results in the conservative movement derailing itself and them not winning more elections. And I hope this also derails the conservative movement in the UK as well, but we'll have to see. But that is it for the video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.